So just to introduce myself, because we introduced each other earlier this morning, my name is Annemarie Graus. I'm a psychologist with a background in neuroscience and educational sciences, and I work at an educational consultancy agency with actually my area of expertise being on the one hand dyslexia and learning disorders, and on the other hand digital literacy. So I conducted this research with Nardie Fanchamps, and we wanted to investigate the influence of serious games on the one hand and educational robotics on the other hand on computational thinking. The computational thinking to promote reading ability and reading motivation in children with dyslexia. So why should we focus on reading abilities? What we see in the Netherlands, but also across Europe and across the world, is that children are reading less and less, and the reading abilities are declining. So there are several reasons. The first one I mentioned, that is that children are reading less and less, but also, for instance, the economic status of some families, whether or not Dutch is spoken at home, or the emphasis teachers place on achieving high reading scores on school. But there are also, for instance, neurodevelopmental disorders such as dyslexia. And for those who are not familiar with dyslexia, it's a deficit in phonological processing, which means that these children suffer difficulties in connecting letters to sounds or sounds to letters. And this leads to persistent difficulties in reading and spelling, despite adequate education and adequate intelligence. So if we do not look into this, if we leave this unaddressed, it has some severe implications actually. If we do not help these children, it hinders them in their ability to master reading and writing skills. It also leads to severe social and emotional difficulties, and also has an effect on reading motivation and learning motivation later in life. So in recent years, there have been lots of methods to help children with dyslexia or children with reading problems, to help them learn to read better. And in recent years, more and more serious games are being used, and more recently, educational robotics are being used to support the children in the treatment of dyslexia. And what we see is that on the one hand, serious games and educational robotics can help children in reading, but what we also see from recent research is that, and you talked about it this morning, is that they have an effect on the development of computational thinking. And I want just to quickly mention research by Van Bergen and Fanchamps from last year. They used educational robotics. They used EduRobot, which I will show you later on. And they looked if EduRobot had an effect on computational thinking or working with EduRobot and BBot. And they saw that it had a big effect on computational thinking, but they also looked in the effect of computational thinking on reading abilities, and they saw that it had a big effect. So the results were very significant. So in this research, we wanted to look deeper into this phenomenon and test this in children that had reading problems. In this study, children with dyslexia, to see if there are similar results. So what we did is, these are our research questions. So first, we wanted to see if the impact of computational thinking via educational robotics or serious game have an effect on reading ability and reading motivation.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there's something in the screen.
Yeah, there is something in the screen. And
on that I cannot remove.
No, I think you can press OK.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. I don't know. In the presentation. Ah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we first wanted to see if there is a difference in computational thinking by the application of serious game or educational robotics. And then we wanted to see if there was a difference in effect measurable on reading ability and reading motivation in both conditions. And then we wanted to see if there were differences in reading motivation. And we also did, and I will tell you about that later, reading motivation interviews. So we wanted to look into the experiential differences children reported regarding their reading motivation and reading abilities.
Just the arrows.
Yeah.
The arrows on the keyboard.
The arrows don't.
You don't work?
Don't work.
Don't worry.
Technical problems.
Don't worry.
Click it once.
And then thank you. Help desk. So this is our research design. What we did is we had 27 children aged 9 to 13, and they participated in the study, and they were assigned to either the group playing the serious game, which I will talk about later, and we had a group playing educational robotics. And before and after the intervention, they would take some tests. They would take computational thinking tests. So for the younger children, that would be the beginner's computational test, and for the older children, the computational thinking test. They did 2 tests to measure reading ability. One test, both Dutch tests, is the 1-minute test, and it measures reading fluency. And we had the Klepel test, and that's a test where children have to read non-existing words, and it measures their decoding abilities. We also did a reading motivation questionnaire and the reading motivation interview. Then we have the intervention, so either educational robotics or playing a series. Then we have the post-test. The intervention period lasted 8 weeks, so 1 week post-test, 1 week pre-test, and 6-week intervention, where in the Asgard Saga or the serious game group, children would play this game for about 30 to 45 minutes each week, together with their healthcare provider or their teacher, which was instructed by the researcher. And the educational robotics group would play a board game, which I will show you later, every week at their school for 30 to 45 minutes, together with the researcher. So I'll just show you the materials we use. So for the serious game group, we used a serious game called Asgard Saga, and it's a serious game specifically created for dyslexic children. What we see is that children like it really, really very much to play the game, playing it. So just to give you an impression, there's no sound. You only hear my colleague talking. But let's see if it will play. As a warrior, a Viking warrior, and they have to do different tasks, reading related or spelling related, so they collect points and they can buy wood or materials for their own Viking village. And children have to plan their way across this landscape. So, yeah, he keeps walking around for another minute or so. Then we have the Autobot, and I brought him with me so we can have a look at him later on. It's a very small robot. I don't know if any one of you has ever worked with Autobot. It's this small robot. And it's
2 years ago, I think.
Yeah. You can also take it out. So Ozobot follows black lines, and it can be programmed. Oh, you turned it on.
Yes, I just thought. Look.
There it is. It follows black lines and can be programmed by color codes or scratch program. Designed a board game in which children had to navigate the board using these color code stickers. To tell Ozobot where to go, and then they would Ozobot would drive across the board, and then children would come to the game cards. And the game cards are from the serious game Asgard Saga, containing the same questions the children would also see in the serious game. So I'll show you just a short example. You can see Ozobot driving here. And then when it arrives at the game cards, children can take a card and do the exercise on the game card. Just a short overview of all the tests we used. To the left, you can see the computational thinking test, pictorial problems children had to solve. Then we had the reading test with, on the left, the existing Dutch words, and on the right, the non-existing Dutch words. We had the reading motivation questionnaire and an example of the reading motivation interview with all the children. I can tell you more about that later. So, okay, findings. It was difficult to analyze the data because I told you we had 27 participants. We wanted to have a lot of more participants, but it was hard to find parents of children that would allow the children to participate in the study. Most of the parents said that their child had been tested enough in the last year, so they didn't give permission to let their child enter. So we aimed at about 50 children, but we had 27. So that had as a consequence that we had to normalize the scores of the computational thinking tests because of the limited amount of participants in each intervention. And we couldn't look at the subcategories of both tests because they were different in each questionnaire, and we had not enough participants, so we only had a normalized total score. But what we did see was that there was a modest improvement in computational thinking for both groups. It is modest, you can see it in the lines here, was absolutely not statistically significant. What we also did is looking at the reading abilities, we saw that playing the serious game led to greater improvement in reading existing words, but the educational robotics showed a greater improvement in reading non-existing words. Also not statistically significant, but what we did see was that within each group, the growth was statistically significant, but not between the groups. So we did not see any clear advantage of one intervention over the other.
So the differences between the lines is just like random difference between the two?
Can you?
Yeah, no, I'm just like the difference between the blue line, right? It's like the experiment, and the red line, which is the serious game, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, because there is a difference in the pretest, I see.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like a random difference between the group, or?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. And I think what we also saw in the previous slide is that one group, and it's the serious game group, the red line, always scored higher than the computational thinking test of the educational robotics group. So I don't know why that is, but they had overall higher scores. We didn't find anything on reading motivation, so that stayed relatively stable. But what we did see, we did a correlation and regression analysis, and we saw strong correlation between reading existing words and non-existing words. But also we found in the regression analysis that computational thinking was found to be positively associated with reading motivation. And that computational thinking was a unique predictor of reading motivation. So that's actually very interesting. This is the analysis of the interviews. So I won't go into too much detail, but what we saw is that the proportion of children in the serious game intervention that indicated a dislike for reading decreased. So they actually thought reading was nicer at the end of the intervention, although it didn't show in the questionnaires. So maybe because we went into reading more deeper, children could explain themselves more adequately. What we saw in the educational robotics group is that their reading motivation preferences stayed relatively the same over time, and reading preferences remained the same over time. So to sum up, we saw a modest but statistically non-significant improvement in computational thinking following serious game intervention or educational robotics intervention. We saw no clear advantage of one intervention over the other, no significant effects on reading motivation for both interventions, but we did see that computational thinking was found positively associated with reading motivation and being a unique predictor. However, as I already mentioned, there are some limitations, and I'll just mention the main limitations. What we saw is that children might have had extra instruction at home or in school, either in computational thinking or in reading. We know that a lot of parents practice with their children at home or at school to become better at reading. What we also should take into account is that measuring the development of reading and reading motivation does not only depend on the development of computational thinking. As I mentioned earlier, there are other factors that contribute. On the one hand, how much children like reading their native language, but also their interest in playing computer games, their interest in technology. What I already mentioned, the comparison of the used computational thinking questionnaires. So because of the limited amount of participants, it was not possible to look into the deeper subcategories of computational thinking. And also the research design. For instance, we did not use a control group, so we couldn't see how children that did not receive an intervention, how they would develop. And on the other hand, 6 weeks for an intervention is a very short period. So for next research, that might be a little bit longer. As I already mentioned, these results contrast with the study of Fanchamps and Rosenberg-Kima, where they did find significant results on computational thinking and reading abilities. However, they did do their study in normal reading children, whereas our study looked at dyslexic children. And we also know that dyslexic children tend to need more time learning to read, but also computational thinking develops different in dyslexic children than in normal reading children. Also, the gradual and cumulative development of computational thinking should be taken into account, and that means that we see some initial growth in these groups. It might be an onset for a greater development, but because of the 6-week intervention period, we couldn't see the full potential of it, and if it is there. Then also the serious game we used is primarily focused at reading abilities and to a lesser extent to computational thinking abilities. So maybe in the future we should use a serious game that is more focused on computational thinking. However, the positive and significant relationship between computational thinking and reading motivation is very interesting, as I already mentioned, because integrating computational thinking into the reading process may offer dyslexic children an alternative way into language processing or into reading, and might benefit the enhanced self-image because children really enjoyed it, and perhaps because they like the intervention so much, might boost their reading motivation also. So to conclude, maybe something to discuss later this afternoon, should computational thinking be integrated into the school curriculum from an early age, and should also be used in the treatment of children with learning disabilities? That was it.
Thank you.
Questions?
Well, I may not be like super scientific person, but since I have like an 8-year-old son at home and he now goes to 2nd grade, and I think that his like learning process has been like super tough